Great. Is this on? Can you? I think it's on. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Hi, Bryan.
Good. How you doing, Victoria?
Good.
This is fun. So here it is, 4 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for being inside with us today. We're here to talk a little bit about mining and technology, specifically what Teck is doing, a real leader in the space. This is a really exciting place for us to be as a mining industry here at the BC Tech Summit. It's very exciting, this province and what it has the capabilities to do right now. The fact that we're such a mining hub already and have been for so long. And as you're all here, we're increasingly becoming this incredible technology hub. And there's just immense opportunities between our industries to innovate together, and it's already happening. And that's the real power of having Victoria here today to talk to you about what a real leader in this industry is doing in Teck Resources, and really talk about like the nitty-gritty of what it means to innovate as a mining company. We're an industry that's always been innovating. Technology's always been at the forefront for an industry like mining, but there's opportunities that are very interesting right now. And so it's really great, Victoria, to be able to be here to chat with you a little bit about it. And I guess the first question I'd ask is, what are the opportunities between the mining industry and technology? I think a lot of people think that there may be some, but perhaps you can talk a little bit about what you think those are and what Teck's doing now.
Yeah, I think there are tons, and it's two ways. Somebody commented to me yesterday that it's so funny to see Teck at this conference, and he had to check himself of what conference am I at? This is a resource company at a technology conference. And this is our first time, but the link is more intuitive than I think we often talk about. So one, mining products are critical to technology, right? So as it was mentioned, Teck is a diversified company. We produce zinc, copper, metallurgical coal, and we have an interest in an oil property. And everyone knows copper is required for electricity, but it's also in all of our smartphones and electric cars. Zinc and metallurgical coal are critical for steel, which is in all the construction, but also fertilizer. And as we look to more progressive agriculture, that's critical. So there's a push from mining into technology, but there's a huge pull. And I was part of the mentorship thing at lunch, and one of the high school students asked me if we still use canaries in coal mines and what has changed. And things have changed dramatically, and we haven't been great about talking about that. But technology is critical to mining in so many aspects, and the people that are at our operations are always thinking about how to do their jobs better, safer, faster, cheaper, because this is what they do every day, and they love to think about innovation and continuous improvement. So I think there's a strong link there that we need to talk about more.
It's fair to say that Teck's always been a technology company. And is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, and I have some favorite stories that I love to tell. I don't know how much people know about Teck, but it's been around for 100 plus years. We created the first zinc electrolytic refinery in Trail in 1902. So we have a long history of innovation. A Teck employee created the walkie-talkie for mineral exploration communications to call in the helicopter, presumably so they wouldn't have to sleep out at night. So we've always been doing this, and I think of it as part of Teck and Cominco, one of the old companies. It's in our DNA, and it's in how people approach work.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about why you're focused on technology and what you hope to achieve out of it, because obviously it sounds great that a company like yours is innovating, but there's a reason to it and there's a purpose for it. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about why you do it.
Yeah. Again, I think why we do it is partially we can't help ourselves. It is in our DNA and what we do, and sites are always changing and improving the way that they do things. But we do look at it from three key drivers. So one is productivity and safety, and I lump those together because I think that they're necessarily connected and not at loggerheads with one another. And a great example of this is our Coal Mountain operation in the Elk Valley. It's scheduled to be shut down this year, but last year the employees, despite knowing that they'd be moving on, they didn't just give up and ride it out. They looked at a remote dozing technology. So could they bring in a remote dozer to enable production under an unstable head wall? So there's still coal down there. You can't send people in because that could fail, even though we have sensors scanning it and predicting when things might come down. So they engaged with an OEM, did a bunch of work, came back and realized that's not good enough. We need a remote dozer and a remote backhoe, and that doesn't exist from this company. But there's this cool company called Remote Control Technologies out of Sudbury that can remote control whatever piece of equipment you want. So they're now partnering with them. I think the equipment went on the last couple weeks. They're training, and that will be operational. So that's a great story of production, productivity, and safety. Another reason is growth. Mining companies are always focused on how to replace resources, right? Because if you're not growing, then you're shrinking, and your investors don't like that. From a growth perspective, one of the cool things that we've done that's downstairs, hopefully everyone saw it, was using VR for projects, so for community engagement. We partnered with a cool company called Lamazoo out of Victoria to create a VR model of our Galore Creek project up in BC. And aesthetically, it's beautiful because it's in this amazing part of the world. But it's also served this really cool purpose of now enabling us to engage with our Tahltan First Nations to show them our plans for the project overlaid on the land that they know so well, so that we can have a conversation about that. And that conversation isn't limited to like really time-specific helicopter flights out there. We can do it all year round and check in and look at the same thing. And that's just so valuable.
The power to that, it's a story I tell a lot, is the Lamazoo partnership with Teck and how it's broadening out to other parts of the industry, but also other sectors, the work they're doing. And I just think of that exact thing, that ability to connect with communities is really such an amazing opportunity for us with technology as an industry, because really as early as we can make those connections with communities about what we do, Indigenous communities and the broader community, it's so powerful. So that Lamazoo work that you've done is really amazing.
Yeah, and we've started with communities, but it'll extend to potential project partners and investors and different regulatory bodies, and yeah, it's only the beginning.
That's really cool. I think there was a video you wanted to show at this point.
Oh yeah, well, I guess the third way that we look at things is from the lens of sustainability. Anyone that's familiar with tech knows that that's core to what we do, is being responsible in terms of our environmental footprint and our engagement with communities. A really cool story on the sustainability side is the work that we've done with MineSense. They have XRF sensors that you mount on the shovel so that when these big shovels are scooping up material, it's scanning and reading those rocks and can help us determine whether it's ore or waste. Because we know that at a coarse scale, but we don't know it at the bucket scale. And the risk there is if we send waste material to the mill, we're wasting energy and water processing that. But if we can make better decisions, then we can be better stewards of those resources. And I do have a cool video to show about that. So just as a final point, the large rotating things at the end are our mills, and often those are presented as a way in which the mining industry hasn't innovated. They've looked the same for the last 100 years. And that's something that we'll have to work on in the next 10 to 20 years. But in the meantime, if we can make sure that we're very efficient about what we put through those, then we're still doing the best that we can with the existing technologies.
That's great. I mean, what a powerful short video that is. I mean, for those of you that are involved in the industry or understand it all, that's amazing work right there to determine what's in the shovel. I mean, that from an efficiency point of view is unbelievable, and is so helpful both on the cost side but also on the environmental side. So really amazing stuff. And I think it kind of leads to my next question around implementing those technologies, because you as Teck are the real industry leaders, and you're really developing a lot of these technologies in-house and testing them. What are some of the challenges to getting these from sort of the bench to out on the mine site, and what are some of the opportunities and what are some of the successes you've seen doing that?
Yeah, there's a lot of trial and error, and we're still figuring out the most efficient and effective process for doing that. But I guess we've started to see it in three ways. There's technology, people, and process. And the technology is one thing, so we try and scan through conferences like this, or mining-specific ones, or technology conferences for entirely different industries. And the second on process is understanding our business enough and understanding the technology enough to know the as-is and to-be states and how to map those out, right? Because change management is so key, and getting to that to-be state is how we get value. So really understanding that. But the third and most important bit is the people. So we're really trying to build or foster a culture of innovation so that people feel empowered to implement technologies or come to a group like mine or to their GM to implement these technologies. Tech's a very site-based group, as I think I've said before, that we want the people at the front lines that know their problems and see them on a daily basis to be the ones that can make a change, because they know exactly how to make these changes successful, and it brings dedication and perseverance. I guess as a little bit of background, I work in a corporate technology and innovation group, and a large part of what we do is try and communicate between sites and say, hey, these guys put in a really cool remote dozer. Do you think there's an application over here? So that's a lot of how we're working right now.
Great. That's very cool. I think you had another video you wanted to show that was...
Oh yeah, good reminder.
Linked to that, yeah.
The story behind this one, Blast Movement Technologies came up with a really cool, simple, hugely valuable technology where you have an RFID tag in a really strong hard ball. We can drop them down a blast hole, blow up the bench, and see where these balls end up so we can see how material moved. And that seems intuitive, but before having this technology, we just had to assume that nothing moved or that it moved a consistent distance. But when you're blowing up rock, that, of course, is not the case. And so one of our young engineers up in our Alaskan mine saw this technology, decided to implement it, figured out that in one blast that he recorded, there was $700,000 of value there. And so I took the story to our Highland Valley mine in a couple slides, tried to describe to them the technology and what had happened at Red Dog, and they said, yep, hook us up, let's do this. And now it's happening at 3 mines, and it's a great story of site-led innovation and tying innovations between sites, and also how we can partner with a small company and support them in expanding their business. So yeah, if you could bring up the second slide.
Very cool. Jeez. You know, you look at being here at the BC Tech Summit and all of the different companies that are here, all the different technologies. I'm interested in, you know, what you see as the next great opportunity for innovation in technology for tech and maybe for the industry more broadly.
Yeah, broadly, I think it's incorporating all of the Industry 4.0 tech. So whether it's putting more sensors on our equipment in our mills so that we actually understand what's happening, all the way to cloud computing and advanced data analytics, and then putting on actuators and robotics on the back end. Specifically, I don't think that people broadly know how much data is collected in the mining environment. Our group says that it's terabytes of data coming off our equipment every day, and we just don't have the people or capabilities to handle that. But I was just talking to a guy who's a CEO of a machine learning advanced analytics for deep learning company, and he was saying everyone wants to work for Facebook and Google because it seems cool, but what they don't realize is that mining has tons of data and really valuable, cool problems to solve. We have to do a better job of talking about that so that we can partner with these companies that bring that expertise, because there's so much value in that data that we don't even know about yet. And I think that's where we and other mining companies are starting to look.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful, and it's something we're talking about a lot in the industry. Is really connecting how our economy works, and especially how the mining industry is working right now when it comes to technology, and the fact that the mining jobs of today are really, a lot of them are down in Gastown right now as we speak, and in other parts of the technology space, and this is happening now, and the opportunities are really boundless for what we have moving forward, and it's really about, I think, getting out and talking to people more about what's happening on the ground right now and what those great opportunities are that are moving forward to engage, folks that are maybe in university now that are thinking, well, mining, is something that's done at the site, and that's not really something maybe I'm into, but without knowing that they can be completely involved in this industry from pretty much anywhere in the province, and it's a really cool opportunity, I think.
Yeah, and there's so much space for collaboration. We, in the last year, started a machine learning project with Google and a company called Pythian, looking at our machine health data to predictively identify failure modes. And what we've really taken out of this is machine learning is cool and has applicability to our business, and there's value there. But moreover, a large part of it's about speaking the same language. So connecting these people that know machine learning, all these data scientists, to our experienced operators and getting them in a room so that they can solve these problems together.
Did you have, I think you had something to show us on machine learning too.
I do.
Look at that. That's set up.
What would I do without you?
Very cool. This next question is one that's really close to my heart because, representing the industry, I'm always looking at how we implement these things across the industry. So, I'm really interested in your thoughts on, how tech can work with the broader industry, how the broader industry can work together more efficiently to implement technologies, to develop these technologies, and to get them out more broadly. Because I really see an opportunity, as I touched off at the start, of having BC really be that incubator for technologies for this industry that we can then export across the mining industry globally and really be that hub of innovation for technology. So I'd be interested in, from a company who's at the leading edge of this, how we ensure that the entire industry has an opportunity to feed into this, and how we collaborate perhaps in a little more seamless way in order to move this forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I see it as layers of collaboration. So there's within the mining industry. 5 years ago, the idea of talking to one of our competitors/peers about what technology projects that we had was out of this world. And last week I sat in a room with, I guess, people kind of like me from two of our competitors' peers and just opened the kimono, as they said, to say, here's everything we're working on. What about you guys? And here are some of our common problems.
Yeah.
And so that's great at the producer level where we're all kind of the same, but I think you had talked about before, like how do you spread that from big companies like Teck down through smaller companies that might not have the capital or stability? And I think that's something that we need to wrap our heads around, that some of the smaller companies are agile and a bit more innovative, but they might not have the ability to absorb risk. And so how can we look at those partnerships within mining to support them and say, okay, well, you go first, but we'll figure out some kind of structure in the agreement so that we can share risk and come in and support you and implement this later. And that's at the mining level. With tech providers, I think we have a long supportive history of partnering with tech groups. There's a company called Tech that does a lot on equipment automation and acquiring different data sets, and we've co-developed and developed and then sold and then supported them in developing different technologies, and that's been a 10-plus year partnership based on trust and knowing that the commercial model for each project might change, but we have a ton of respect and trust and we understand each other. And we're really excited about building those similar relationships with MindSense and Lamazoo and Fingerfood and all these really cool tech companies and all the ones in the future. We want them to know that mining is a welcoming space, and tech specifically is looking to partner. At the next level up, it's outside of just mining and into other natural resources industries, and I think a really good example of that is COSIA. So it's focused on oil sands, but for those that don't know, Canada's Oil Sand Innovation Alliance, it was a group of oil sands producers that got together and said, we all need to survive to solve these environmental problems, let's just do it together. And so over the few years that's been working, there's been $1.4 billion of technology contributed, to which all of the partners have licenses, and that's something like 900 different technologies. That's amazing, and that's from oil, which previously was very protective.
Wow, okay. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the BC Digital Supercluster and what those opportunities are there, because I think that's just something that hasn't been talked about enough, how there's multiple sectors working on digital solutions, including, and importantly, the mining industry, and I just think it's a story that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and the supercluster is the thing that I've thought about the most over the last couple of months, and I'm super excited about the supercluster. I think that brings it to the next level. So it's outside of mining, and it's outside of natural resources. It's now Canada-wide. So how do we all work together to expand everybody's business? And we'll be putting forward a proposal with a bunch of tech providers and another producer, and it really forces some of those conversations about IP and data sharing and what are your problems, and that's our problem as well. And it's building this trust and this willingness to work together, because we all need to get someplace, and we're better together than trying to do this individually. So I think we'll all learn a lot through the supercluster over the next couple of years of how to work together to get stuff done rather than being closed and protective.
I think it's so exciting, and to all the points you've just made, I mean, this is really the opportunity to de-silo the conversations and really talk about, how we use the land and how we, do digital and how we do all of our different sectors in a way that is in partnership. It's a story that hasn't even really been told at all yet about what the opportunities are here, and I'm personally really excited to see what's going to come of this supercluster moving forward. So.
And I think you touched on a good point that often I think about the supercluster in terms of Canadian businesses and how to make them competitive on the global scale, but it's also Canadian stakeholders. How do you get them more involved in every aspect of this? And that's the communities and First Nations and regulators and different levels of government. How do we all work together? Universities. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer. I mean, we've gotten so positional in the world, right? Everyone gets into their corners and, takes their ball and goes home sometimes, right? And I think there's these powerful conversations happening now that need to be talked more about the partnerships that are actually really occurring out there, and you guys are really at the forefront of it and really deserve to be commended for the work you're doing, and this is what's going to move the needle forward and get us to a point where we can continue to build responsible mines in this province, and that's got to happen, folks. We need more copper, we need more steel making coal, because we're going to electric cars, wind turbines, solar panels, so we need this stuff, and this is the sort of work that's going to get us to that point. So I think it's really great. We've got some time for a couple questions from the audience, if anyone has any. I would just ask that you wait. I think there's microphones that are going around, so just wait for a microphone. I see one there to come to you, because I know that this is being taped, so we want to make sure we get the audio done properly. So you, sir, I think microphone's on its way.
There we go. With all the open information sharing and starting to work more collaboratively, how does tech still maintain a sustainable competitive advantage? Because oftentimes intellectual property was the sustainable competitive advantage for major corporations.
Yeah, I think for everyone in the supercluster, it will come down to each company really identifying what their competitive advantage is. And for tech, we realize that in part it's the assets that we have, and in part it's how we operate. So technologies might be the commodity, and therefore we shouldn't be in the development space, but we can pilot and implement and refine those technologies, we think, better than a lot of our competitors. And so that's where we want to sit, not on the development, but identifying a really good technology that matters for our specific problems because we know them well enough, and then being really quick in operationalizing those technologies.
Great, thank you. I'd be interested from both of you about where you see you would have mining firms, both from Teck being on the large side and also from some of the smaller mining firms. What is the entry size for technology firms? Do you see that you would be working more with someone who has a very developed technology, or how comfortable are you with working with pure startups?
For Teck specifically, I don't think it's on the size of the company so much as the readiness of the technology, and startups are probably tired of hearing that, but we need something at a stage where we can test it at one of our operations to really see what the value is and how well we can implement that. We also do support a lot of research, but that's through a slightly different mechanism, right? So research on the geoscience side or, some early operational stuff. But we are looking for something that we can say, yeah, let's figure out a plan to test this either at the bench scale or in an operation and then scale up. And I think something like ShovelSense is a really good example of that they had a prototype on a loader and we said, okay, let's work together to scale this up to the first commercial demonstration on a proper mining shovel. And we're happy to support technologies in that space that we know will make an impact for us.
That's a really great question. And from the industry perspective, it's the most important one because, you look at a company like Teck that's so diversified across multiple jurisdictions, across multiple commodities, and is so forward-thinking and able to, implement, sort of move some of these technologies down the road versus some other of our operators that maybe have one mine, right? And are looking to really have that business case really solidly presented to be able to access, shelf-ready technology that can be, implemented right away. So it's the scalability aspect is really the key because our operations are so unique. And I'm speaking of BC specifically, but for the industry generally. So I think that's the next big piece of the conversation is how do we get these technology, how do we partner and then get these technologies to the readiness stage where the rest of industry can take advantage from a scalability point of view, and that's where those powerful conversations that you're having already with other operators is really paramount.
Yeah, and acknowledging that there is a gap, right? That often once you have something that's pilotable, you've jumped that gap. But I think there are some funding mechanisms to ease the research to pilot stage gap, and then it will come down to companies collaborating. So maybe one company can't support a tech company and getting across that, but a few of them can get together. And we have internal examples of doing that in partnership with Phelps Dodge and a company out of Australia. So there are ways of doing that, and it's just identifying the right people that also have that shared need and saying, let's get together to share that risk and share our resources to get it across the line.
Got time for one more question, I think. Oh, great.
Hi, I have a question about the ShovelSense technology. That's for material that's already come out of the ground and you still have to deal with the waste. What about applying that technology below the ground before you even dig and before you have to deal with the waste?
Are you talking geophysics?
I might be.
Yeah, I think that's something that our peers have focused on a lot more than we have to this point. So I'm thinking Rios and Newcrest have put a lot of effort into understanding their ore body so that they can know that in advance before they mine, and then you can optimize your mine plan based on that. Honestly, we haven't focused that much. We do a lot on the geoscience side, and I think we have really strong geologists that know the research and know how to explore. And we've been very supportive of key geophysical technologies over the last 50 years, but we are focusing at this point more on the mining side.
Great. Victoria, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today, and thanks to all of you for being here. I'll give you the final word, Victoria, on our session today.
No, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Thanks.